So we're looking at the instrument panel of my 68-912. As you can see, there's 5 holes for the 5 gauges. This hole measures 3 1/8. Both the inner and the outer, or the outer 2 holes, are 3 1/8 of an inch. These 2 inner circles here, and here, measure 4 inches on the hole diameter. And this measures approximately 4 5/8 of an inch. Now I went with Speedhut gauges, and their 4 inches fit in these 2 inner holes here pretty well, but they don't make a gauge. You really can't find a gauge that will fit this hole for a classic or vintage 911 or 912. So I went with the 4 1/2, and then I'm using carbon fiber sheeting on this panel here to drill holes into that I'm going to place the gauges in. And also, because you can't really find a gauge that's 3 1/8 of an inch here, I went with Speedhut's 2 5/8 here. Speedhut carries two sizes for smaller gauges. I think they're 2 1/2, and I know the largest one is 2 5/8, and I think the smaller one's either 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. But so I went with the larger or the smaller 2. So 2 5/8 goes here and here. And then the 2 4 inches from Speedhut go here and here. And then I went with the 4 1/2 here. Now you're looking at a template that was used to mark out the circles for which the hole saw was based on. So you have your 5 holes that are marked out here. And these scribes that look circular here were drawn with a pencil on the inside of the trunk area when this cardboard template, was taped to the steel gauge panel. You simply go in the trunk then and reach up and mark out these scribe circles. Now, because there's going to be angular differences based on where your pen or your pencil is, and you could be off anywhere from a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch on the error of where these concentric rings are, what you need to ensure when you're done, what I would recommend you do, which worked out for me, is to take, once your template is cut that fits on the steel portion of your instrument panel here, take the full length and then divide it by 2, and then find that distance and call that the center of your instrument panel. Then go to track out the center. You know this is 4 5/8, so divide that by 2, then go to the radius and then mark something, but mark it with a light pencil, not the final marking. But then just at least establish the center for these. And then the final thing that you really want to ensure that has to enforce the symmetry of where you drill these holes is the following. Once you start with your center hole in the center based on the center of this piece that you measured out. You then measure from that center hole to this center hole for the right inner circle here, the center circle to the right inner circle. That must be at least for my 68-912, that measured out to be 4 7/8 of an inch. So the distance from this hole to this hole was 4 7/8. Then I had to make sure that the distance between the center of this hole and the center hole was also 4 7/8. These have to be symmetrically distanced out. Because if they're off, if you use this circle independently and then mark this hole, use this circle, and naturally the thinking would be to use what you scribe out, then get a gut feeling for what the center was, and then just go with that, and then drill a guide hole, a pilot hole here. You're going to be off. So mark your first hole in the center of the form of the template, and then calculate. You want to have a level hole where all the holes are on the same line. You can see the hole here is on this line. And then this center hole, mark this hole as 4 7/8 from the center hole. Then mark this hole on a straight line here at 4 7/8 from the center hole here. So that's 4 7/8 from this hole. Then on a straight line, you can see all these holes are on a straight line. For this outer left circle, mark that hole, mark that center at 4 1/8 from this center. And then make sure that the hole's on a straight line with all the other holes. Then over here, mark your straight edge underneath the center of those other centers. And then mark this hole at 4 1/8. Mark the hole for this right outer gauge at 4 1/8 from this second from the right gauge center. So once you've established the symmetry between the key is the center hole from which you mark these two centers here based on 4 7/8 from the center hole. So you start the center hole first, then you come 4 7/8 off the center hole, mark those, make sure it's on a straight edge. Then from these two outer holes, you go 4 1/8. Once the holes are centered, all the holes are on a straight edge. You go 4 1/8 and then mark this hole. Then over here on the right, make sure all the holes are on a straight edge. And then mark this hole on the outer gauge at 4 1/8 from this. So you will have therefore established symmetry among all these hole saw cutouts that will enforce and allow you to meet up with the gauges as they're appropriately centered in the steel cutouts on the instrument panel in the car. And if you didn't do this, and you pretty much went with a gut feeling of what the center was from your scribes when you were lying down in the trunk with your hand way up in the inside of the instrument panel drawing these. So all I could see, again, this template was taped to the instrument panel. I then went in the trunk with the pencil and then marked these scribes reaching way up to the instrument gauge. So the only thing I saw were these white circles from the trunk area, the trunk space. Then I measured the center of the form that was cut out, found the center, and then marked that center. This will give you, on the top, it's quite thin. The top of the center gauge is about a 1/2 inch or closer to the top, whereas on the bottom it's further away. But once you find the center of this template lengthwise here, and then mark this hole, then you just come off this one marked hole, 4 7/8, 4 7/8, mark, and then go to the outer holes, mark the outer holes from 4 1/8 from the outer ones, and then you'll have it. Then, taking a Dremel tool, I taped this template on. You can see I have a spare here. So your carbon fiber sheet will be a large 1 foot by 2 foot piece, because that's typically what you can order from. And you're going to work with the 6 inches on 1/2, and then put this on 6 inches of the 1 foot length here, because if you screw it up, you have the spare other 6 inches to work with. So you're going to tape this down. I used painter's tape, several areas. I taped this down onto the carbon fiber sheet. Then I took once I made sure it was taped down, it was firmly taped down, I took a Dremel tool and then very carefully drilled through the carbon fiber sheet here, and then through the carbon, holding the Dremel tool vertically, drilling through this with a very small pilot drill bit through here, this center, and then same thing, holding the Dremel tool vertically, and then drilled through this all the way through the carbon fiber sheet, and then this hole, and then that hole. Then I took once I had my 4-inch hole saw, then you have the pilot hole. Then you take this off your carbon fiber sheet, go to your drill press, and install your hole saw. And then this is the pilot. You drill the pilot hole. This is your hole saw. And then on your drill press, you fasten this to a piece of plywood, 3/4 or 1/2 inch plywood, because you can't drill into the bottom of your hole saw, your drill press table, which is steel. Then you tape this down. You don't need to really tape it. You just C-clamp this. You C-clamp the carbon fiber sheet to the plywood on the edges, not where you're using it, not in the usable area, right here. And then you leave 1 inch on the edge of the plywood right here for a C-clamp that will knuckle down on your drill press table. So there's a C-clamp here. There's a C-clamp holding the plywood on your drill press table here on the plywood. You leave 1 inch hanging out here where you can get some meat on your drill press table. Now your plywood is fastened to your drill. So you line this up with the you first use 2 C-clamps on the edge here, and then 1 here on the unusable area of the carbon fiber sheet. So your plywood is about the same. If your plywood was, let's do it the simple way. If your plywood was this blue towel, you move your carbon fiber sheet to the edge like that, 1 inch away from the edge of the plywood. Then the unusable space on the carbon fiber sheet, you C-clamp down right here on your plywood. The blue is the plywood. You're going to have, this is going to be carbon fiber sheet right here. So on the edge, you C-clamp right here to hold that down. And then on this edge, you C-clamp the unusable area onto the blue is the plywood. You C-clamp the carbon fiber sheet on the edge of the plywood here with a C-clamp. Then leaving a 1 inch space here on this edge of the plywood, this is C-clamped down. Finally, once this is tightened, then you move the piece of plywood with the carbon fiber sheet on it that's firmly established right under the drill bit of your hole saw. Once that's established, I keep pressure on the drill bit. Once that's established, then go over to the C-clamp on the plywood here and tighten the plywood here down to your drill press table right there. And the edge of the carbon fiber sheet is right here. You don't want to clamp down on the usable area. This is going to be the usable area. So what you're going to be drilling out looks like this carbon fiber piece without the hole in it. Or you can do it the other way and not have the piece cut out yet. But either way, I never had the carbon fiber sheet totally on the plywood. I left room on the plywood here so I could C-clamp really tightly on plywood to the drill press table once the carbon fiber sheet was directly, the pilot hole on the carbon fiber was directly under the drill bit on the hole saw. And again, the carbon fiber sheet is fastened down tightly on the plywood by the C-clamp here and the C-clamp here, off the usable distance of your piece, your instrument panel sheet here. And then just drill away with your hole saw. Now, one of the things you need to be careful about with the hole saw is whenever you're cutting steel or plastic with a drill bit on a drill press, or using any type of a saw on metal or plastic, just let the bit do its work. Don't ever force any type of a bit through any material. Just put a light amount of pressure and always let any type of a saw blade or a bit do its own work. Let it work for you. Do not bear down on any type of a blade. And then as you finally have your subtle amount of pressure on this, you'll eventually see a piece of carbon fiber spinning here, and then it's done. And then you'll have this frayed edge here left over, and then just go through your pieces. This is a 2 5/8 inch hole saw. These are 4 inch. These are 2 5/8. These are 4 inch hole saws, and this is a 4 1/4 inch hole saw, which is this piece here. So there you have it. That's how you drill out a carbon fiber sheet for an early vintage Porsche, at least from my 68 912, that had the dimensions that I went over.